In this lesson, we're going to introduce the concept of biodiversity. We're going to come back to this quite a bit, but we're going to talk about what it is and the importance of biodiversity, and then how soil contributes to biodiversity in an area. So biological diversity means how many different kinds of species and the genes that they contain and everything about it. So it's all about the biosphere and how diverse the biosphere is. The more diverse our biosphere is, the more resilient it is, or the more stable it is, and the more able it is to deal with change in there. So we're looking for large numbers of species, large numbers of habitats, large numbers of ways that energy can flow through ecosystems. Genetic diversity is more focused. So genetic diversity looks at a specific species and the diversity of genes that occur within that species. The more diverse the species is, the more likely it is to be able to survive and adapt in changing environmental conditions. And so we look for, if we have species where we have fewer and fewer, let's for example say the male side of the species, and we narrow and our species gets so small that we only have 50 males left, we now don't have a very large diversity of the genetic material that's available, and so all of the offspring are only going to have the genetic material from those initial 50 males. And so if we can have an ecosystem that has 2,000 males in it, we're going to have much more opportunity for genetic diversity than we would before, because we'd have more members of the species that could survive and reproduce. We also look at ecosystem diversity. So now we're looking at the bigger picture. We're looking for having lots of different kinds of biomes, lots of different kinds of land areas, like those that are listed on your screen. So we're looking for not having all of one kind of thing in an area. And then we look at functional diversity. Now this comes back to that nutrient cycling. We want to make sure that the energy and matter are flowing through ecosystems. And that's what the functional diversity is. If we're cutting back on saying, like, let's say there's no more phosphorus in an area and it's not cycling anymore, and we didn't talk about sulfur, but that's another thing that cycles through ecosystems. If those things aren't occurring in a specific area, then that's going to limit the biodiversity of the area, because not as many things are going to be able to survive and reproduce. So when we look at that all together at our national capital, now we're looking at all of those kinds of diversities are important when we talk about biodiversity. So we want that ecological diversity, which is what we called biodiversity at the beginning. We want to have that variety of ecosystems around the planet. We want to have the diversity of species. We want to have the genetics diversity within the species. And then we want to have those nutrient cycles that are occurring and the energy moving through our ecosystems. Some examples of species diversity, some things that we don't normally see in our area of the world. The picture on the left is a plant. Actually, it's one of those that's kind of like a Venus flytrap kind of plant, except for obviously much bigger. The part in the middle here actually has a digestive juice in it, so as insects and even small rodents and things like that fall in there, they dissolve and they are used by the plant. So this is a plant that's like a decomposer at the same time. And then all of the crazy amount of different creatures that are out there and all their different appearances. So why do we talk about soil then when we're talking about biodiversity? Well, because for all of our terrestrial ecosystems, if you don't have soil, you can't have biodiversity. You have to have the nutrients that are within the dirt itself to make it be soil. Soil is more complex. We're not just talking about looking at clay, especially here in Arizona. You go outside, if you dig down a little bit and you're not like in your yard where you have grass or something like that, you go out in the desert, we don't have a really deep amount of soil here. We have like a little bit on top, and then we go right into clay and bedrock, which is why we don't have as large of a biodiversity here in the desert area. So there's not as much rain, which also contributes to the soil quality. But we don't have a lot of plant material because we don't have great soils in this area. So you're going to have to read a little bit to kind of fill in the blanks on these ones. You're going to be describing in your notes the different kinds of soil horizons. You will need to know them for your test. Our ones that are primary importance, that O and A horizon, that's where plants tend to live and hang out. That's where there's a lot of animal activity usually if we've got good deep soils. But it is important because it's the basis for everything. It's the basis for our ecosystems when we're talking about our land-based ecosystems, obviously. So this is what's called a soil profile, showing the different layers of soil. When you look at, for us, our soils would be considered more of on the immature side, not necessarily because they're young but they're just not developed well. And some of that has to do a lot with water, and the lack of water here in areas. Where you see the mature soil, you're going to see that more frequently in areas with lots of water. Not the extreme amounts like you would in tropical rainforests. They actually have very poor soils because it rains so much that it kind of leaches all the nutrients out of the soil. Where you can find that happy medium, particularly in our temperate rainforests, and in our areas where we have, like back east, where we have our big broadleaf forests and things like that. You're going to see really nice, deep, rich soils where there's enough moisture that plant material can break down, that we have lots of insect activity, fungus and bacteria activity within the soil. And so we have, it allows for it to build up over time, and then it gives it a nice, deep place for roots to settle in and lots of nutrients for them to pick up.